In this Blender tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can create this fractured text animation. And this is what it looks like in the preview window in Blender. And here's what it looks like when it's fully rendered. Alright, first thing we need to do, or I'm going to do, is reload the startup file. Let me turn on screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing. First thing, get rid of this cube because we don't need it. I'm going to go ahead and change this from Blender render to Cycles render while I'm thinking about it. First thing I'm going to do is add a floor. And for adding a floor, I'm going to add a mesh plane. And then I'm going to scale that up fairly large. And if this side panel right here is not open on your computer, you can press the letter N on your keyboard and it toggles it in and out. I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of this plane to 100 by 100. And then I'm going to push 1 on the number pad to change it to front side view. And then I'm going to push 5 to change it to orthographic view. And then I'm going to push 8 just to tilt it down a little bit. Because I don't use a mouse, I use a laptop and a touchpad, so I generally use keystrokes to navigate. It's generally a lot easier with a laptop. Now I want to go ahead and give this floor a material while I'm thinking about it. Go ahead, click on the Materials tab, click on New, and then choose Mix Shader. Because I want the floor to be somewhat reflective. I want the first color, or the first shader, to be a diffuse, and the second shader to be a glossy. I want the floor to be black with a little bit of reflection. So I'm going to make the diffuse color black. And then I'm going to make the glossy color white. Now I want it to show a lot of details instead of being blurry, so I'm going to change it from 0.2 to 0.001. In a sense, I want it to appear black, to be a really deep color. I'm going to change this to 0.1. Because what that does, it favors the diffuse color more than the glossy. Alright, the next thing you want to do is add text. Add text. And you can see it right here. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it better. Now I'm going to go ahead and rotate it on the x-axis. So press R on the keyboard, and then X, and then 90. That way it's pointing straight up and down. Now we want to change this text. You can put in whatever you want, but I'm going to put in the word fracture. So press Tab on your keyboard and then backspace to erase, and then type fracture, F-R-A-C-T-U-R-E, and then press Tab again to exit out of edit mode. Now I'm going to go ahead and scale this text up to roughly the size of this grid from one side to the other. So I'm going to press S on the keyboard and then just scale it until it gets about that size. And then I'm going to grab the X tab and then slide it over, and I can see I need to make it a little bit larger still. So I'm going to press size again, make it a little bit larger, and there we go. Now I'm going to recenter it. Now I want to go over here to the font properties or text properties tab. I want to add a little bit of a thickness to it. Now I'm going to press 8 on the number pad just to tilt it a little bit more so we can see thickness. Because you can see there's no thickness to it. Now I'm going to extrude this to 0.1. 0.1. See, I added some thickness to it. Now I'm going to press 2 on the number pad to tilt it back down. Or, you know, from that position you could just press 1 and then it goes back down to front side view. Alright, the next thing I want to do is change this to wire view or wireframe. Now, in order to, you know, apply physics to text, you need to convert it to a mesh. And how you do that, you press Alt, hold the Alt button down, and then press C on the keyboard, and it brings up this little menu. Choose the bottom one, which is Mesh from Curve Meta Surf Text. Choose that. And now you can see that the text has become a mesh. But you can look at it and see it's irregular looking. Like there's more geometry down here, less geometry on the straights. And you want to get rid of that because it would cause your fracture modifier to do weird things later on. So what you want to do, you want to come over here to the Tools tab or Modifiers, and then Add Modifier, and go down here to Remesh. And initially it's going to look like it really screwed up. But what you want to do, you want to make sure you deselect the Remove Disconnected Pieces. And then, excuse me, on the Octree depth, you need to turn this up until the text looks smooth. Turn it up one at a time. It's usually going to be about 7 or 8. 7 looks pretty good, but 8 looks even better. And see how the mesh, the geometry looks so much better than it did before. Once you get that done, press Apply. Now, what you want to do, click Tab, and then press A once or twice until all the vertices and all the text, all of it's selected and it's all orange. And then go over here to Smooth Vertex. Click that once, and then down here, change this to 2. And the reason why I'm doing that is because it just makes the text look smoother and so forth, especially after you fracture it. Now press the Tab button once again to exit edit mode, and then click this smooth button. I'm going to go ahead and go back to material mode. Now what we want to do is give this text a material. So go over here to the Materials tab and then click New. Now we're going to name this material Outside. And the reason why we're doing that is because we want the outside of the text to be different than the inside of the text. Now, over here, click on the plus so we can add another material. And then we click New again. And then name this one Inside. Now, what color would we want the inside to be? In mine, I chose a white, kind of a grayish color. And to do that, I chose a velvet BSDF material, and then I kept it the default color. But on the outside, I wanted it to be red but glossy and reflective. So I chose Mix Shader. The first material was, of course, a diffuse. And the second material is a glossy. Make sure the glossy is set to completely white. And then I set the roughness to 0.001 because I wanted to have a lot of details in the reflection. Now I want it to be a red color, but a dark red. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the green all the way down by left clicking and then dragging to the left. And then on the red, I want to set that to 0.25. So just left click on it, 0.25, and then enter. Now I want it to favor the dark red color, so I want this set to 0.2. With that done, we need to raise the text just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a specific amount. I'm just going to do it basically 3 blender units. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to rotate it on the Y axis. Rotate and then Y. That way I can make this side of the text hit the ground before the rest of the text. Once that's done, we can go over here to the cell fracture. Click that. And then I want the text to break up into about 250 pieces. So I want to change the source limit to 250. Left click, 250, and then enter. I want the pieces to be small, so make sure small is checked. I want there to be smooth faces. Basically, whenever the text is together, I want it to look as much like one piece as possible instead of a whole bunch of pieces until it hits the floor. Now, the material, I need to change this to 1 because 0 basically means 1 and 1 basically means 2 and 2 means 3 and 3 means 4. It's a weird way they go about doing this because what this has to do with is sockets. When it's on 0, the material being used is socket socket 0, which is the first one you see here. When it's on 1, it's using socket 1 and socket 0. If I had it on 2, it would use socket 2, socket 1, and socket 0. But we want it on 1. That way the outside ends up being this material and the inside is this material. That's the best I can explain it. I know it works that way. Why they chose to do it that way, I have no idea. And I do believe that's all we need to do. Now we need to click OK. And then it will go through. And what it's actually doing is, I couldn't even really explain it, probably in any good amount of detail. But it's basically looks like it's creating a block around the text. And then it's breaking it off based on the individual faces of the text. And then leaving only the shards that's inside the text mesh. And then everything else is going away. That's what it looks like. I don't know for sure if that's what it's doing, but hey, I'm a Blender rookie. So I'm going to fast forward through the rest of this. Oh, okay, the fractured modifier is finished doing what it's doing. Now, I want you to keep in mind, This text that you see here on layer 1, it's just the regular text. Because everything the fracture modifier done, it put it on layer 2. Right now we're on layer 2. To go ahead and make this work correctly, we want to go ahead and at this point make sure we're on layer 1 by clicking on this box, on the layer 1 box, and then choose the floor. Now you want to push M on the keyboard and then move the floor to layer 2. I should have done that differently, but I wasn't thinking about it. But this works just fine doing it this way. Now go back. You want to go ahead and move the camera and, well, go ahead and move the camera to layer 2 also. It just makes it simpler. Same thing with the lamp. Go ahead and move that to layer 2 by pushing M on the keyboard and then choosing layer 2. Now go over to layer 2, and now you got your lamp, you got your camera, you got your floor all over here on layer 2. And it just makes it easier this way. Now this is the fun part. Now I'm going to press 1, the front side view, and then I'm going to hold down the control and then 8 on the number pad to shift this down, because again I'm using a laptop without a mouse. Alright, what we need to do here, because I want to make sure I'm not selecting this lamp or the camera. I want to just uncheck the lamp just so it's not in the way. And same thing with the camera. Just click on the eyeball in this outliner. I forgot what it was called there for a second. And then just right click on any one of these pieces, because if we look at it, there's a piece here, there's a piece here, there's literally around 250 pieces. And if we look in the outliner, we can see that there's actually 265 pieces. So just click on any of them. And then go over here to the Physics tab. And then click on Rigid Body. Make sure Dynamic is checked. And make sure it's set to Active. And this is a big one right here. Make sure the collision margin is not checked. If it is checked, it will do funny things. Now I want to go ahead and change the friction to a fairly high number, 0.9. And I want to change the bounciness to 0.25, because when it hits the floor, I want it to bounce off the floor just a little bit. Alright, with that done, go over here to your Physics tab on the left. Click that. And then press B, the letter B on your keyboard, because it brings up your box select. And then left click and drag your box around all of your text. And what that does is it selects all of your text. And then over here, press this button, Copy from Active. And what that does, it takes all the physics information that you applied to the one piece and then applies it to all of the pieces. Once that's done, we can go ahead and tick on the floor, which is right here, and we need to add physics to it. Click on Rigid Body and then change it from active to passive. And what that does, it basically will just, the floor will not move. It will stay in a static position, but yet it will have physics properties. And it will interact dynamically with the text. Basically, it gives the text something to hit, something to fall on, instead of falling straight through it. Because if we didn't, I'll show you what I mean. I'll go ahead and get rid of the physics for the floor, and then we'll press play, and you can see the text just falls straight down. It doesn't hit anything. So we want the floor to have physics, but we want it to be passive because we don't want it to fall. We don't want gravity to pull the floor down. See, now if we press play, but as you can see, some of them fell through the floor, and if we look down here, some of them's falling through. We'll fix that problem here in a minute. Now, what we want to do, we want to set up a light, because we want our scene to be black so that the reflections show up really nice. First thing we want to do is go ahead and go to our World tab. Choose Use Nodes, and then we can do this one of two ways. We can either change the color to straight black, and it does the same thing, or we can just turn the strength down to 0, and it would do the same thing. Now go back over here to our lamp. Go ahead and click on the eyeball to make it active, I guess you could say. Now I'm going to press 8 on the number pad so I can shift the view. I'm going to zoom out a little bit by pressing the minus key. Now I want to move this lamp out here away from the text. I'm going to press 2 to shift it. Now I'm going to raise it up. Now I want to change the light. So I'm going to press on the property of the light, which is right here, the lamp property, I guess you could call it. I'm going to make that a sun instead. Click on the Sun tab, click on Use Nodes, and I'm going to set that to 3. I'm going to go ahead and shift this down, and I'm going to rotate the lamp on the Z-axis. Press R and then Z, and then rotate it so it's pointing towards the text. I don't think that's absolutely necessary with when you're using the sun setting, but it's a good habit to get into. Now I'm going to turn it all to the left, and then I'm going to rotate the light again on the X-axis so that it's pointed up at the text. Rotate, press R, and then X. And see, there we go. No matter which perspective we look at, the light shining on the text. Alrighty. Now we want to set up our camera. So go ahead and click on your camera, and then make sure you have your eyes turned on. Now you want to click 0 on your keypad to look through your camera. And as you can see, your camera's not looking anywhere near it. But since I'm using a keyboard, I'm going to use these numbers to actually navigate, because it's easier using to use these on a laptop with when you don't have a mouse where you can pan and tilt with the mouse, because I don't have a middle mouse key. So I'm going to increase the size of this preview area just by pushing plus on the keyboard. Now I'm going to move the camera backwards, basically away from the text, by shifting that to a more negative number. And I'm going to tilt the camera up by shifting that to a more positive number. Now I want to rotate the camera on the Z-axis to the right, so I need to shift the numbers to the left, or make it a lower number or closer to 0. Now we can play this and see what it looks like. This is from the camera's perspective. Now we only need it to be 120 frames for this. So right here where it says end, just change 250 to 120. I always work in 30 frames per second. A lot of people prefer 24 or 25, but I work in 30 frames, and this would be a 4-second long animation. Now what we want to do here is click on this tab. I'm not even sure what they call it, but a scene tab, I guess. And then go down here to Rigid Body Cache. And now we can click Bake or Free All Bakes or whatever. But it won't work right now because we don't have our file saved, which I should have done this earlier. I have lost many things I was working on by forgetting to save my progress like I did in this video. But while we're at it, I'm going to go ahead and save. And then I'm just going to call this Fracture. Now we actually can do rigid body caching, because when it comes to rigid body cache, it saves the rigid body cache in the Blender file. It's not separate files. And if you don't save it first, what it ends up doing, and if you don't save it afterwards, after you bake it, it ends up just putting it in the memory, and then if you close the program and reopen it, the cache is no longer there. So I'm going to go ahead and change the end from 250 to 120. And then I'm going to click Bake All Dynamics. And what it done in that little quick little split second, it literally baked the fracture, or all the motion of all these pieces. And if we click on any one of these, we can see that it's got the little orange line down here that represents that it's in bake. Alrighty, now we can go ahead and preview it, and that's pretty much it. Now let's run a test render and see what this looks like. I'm going to go over here to the camera, or the render settings. I'm going to change this to full HD, which I want basically set that up to 100. I'm going to choose an output folder, and I'm going to just create a new folder and call it fractured text output. And just make sure I got that folder selected, click accept, and here it shows that it will output to the fracture text output folder. I'm going to change it to JPEG, turn the quality all the way up, and down here on sampling, you want to have this number probably anywhere between 100 and 200. For this test render that I'm getting ready to do, I'm just going to put it on 25. That way it does it quickly. Down here at performance, I'm going to change this from 64 and 64 to 32 and 36. Now that may seem odd, but there's actually something to 32 and 36. Because if we think about it, I have this set at 1920 by 1080. And what's the ratio of 1920 by 1080? That's 16 by 9. And that's the same ratio that's down here to a degree. Because 32, you can divide it by 16 twice. And you can divide 36 by 9 4 times. So basically what I'm doing is whenever it generates the individual squares, like I'll show you what I mean. Render image. Whenever it's generating these individual squares, there's no partial squares at the edge, because the ratio of these squares is divisible by the ratio of the entire frame, if that makes any sense. So that whenever it gets to the edges, as you can see, there's no partial square. It just makes it a little bit more efficient, a little bit quicker, if that makes any sense. I'm not explaining myself very well. I'm probably distracting anyone who's watching this. But it doesn't look too bad. Even at 25, it doesn't look all that bad. I'm going to go back over here to 3D view, and I'm going to play it so that till the point it just barely is starting to hit the floor. Maybe a couple more frames, and then render that and see what that looks like. And I'm just testing different points just to make sure it actually looks correctly before I go through and actually render the entire scene. And based on everything I see, it looks like it's doing it correctly. It doesn't look too bad. Almost looks like a candy cane. Alrighty. Go back over here to 3D view. And this is actually pretty much it. I think this whole scene is ready to render. Now I want to go ahead and change this to a higher number. I think 100 is plenty. And I'm using a laptop with a Core i7-4720 HQ processor. It's a 4-core processor. I only have it runs at the base clock, or the normal clock speed is 2.6 gigahertz, but I only have it running at 2 gigahertz because it will start running hot. But let's see how long it takes for one frame to render, so you have an idea how long it would take to render the entire scene. Because granted, you're going to have literally 120 frames to render, and without graphics cards and so forth, the rendering with CPU is going to be fairly slow. But if we look at this, it's still going to be less than 2 minutes per frame, which isn't terrible. But while this is rendering, I realize I don't explain myself very well in these tutorials. Making tutorials is very new to me, so I'm pretty sure I confused people. I get off on a tangent. So if you have any questions, ask me in the comment section of this video, and I will try to answer your question. And as I do more of these tutorials, they will get better. But anyway, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching this tutorial. And again, don't hesitate to ask questions. Later, people.